Hello, hello. All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the false start. My audio wasn't working for some reason, but welcome to another training for hiking live Q&A. My name is Rowan Smith, and on these live streams, I answer your questions around training for hiking. Now, today's stream, what we are going to be doing is I've got one particular question that I had sent through, which we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive on because it's a very, very big topic. It's a very, very sort of yeah, there's a lot of going on, and I wanted to sort of spend a bit of time really exploring this topic and talking through things in a bit of detail. So if anyone does join this live, if you did have any questions you want me covering on top of that, feel free to plug them into chat. But aside from that, I'm going to be covering this particular topic in a bit of detail. So, what we're talking about today are tips for long distance hiking adventure. And the question got sent through was I'm attempting a 900-kilometer hike across Australia in October. I am inexperienced at multi day hiking and would appreciate tips and advice, especially from anyone who's done long road walks in the past. He sent through some details around his route. So, today we're going to be diving into a bunch of different things that you can do to help prepare for a long distance adventure. And these tips will be applicable for anyone who's just doing a few days in a row, a couple of weeks in a row, all the way up to people who are doing, multiple months in a row. Because when it comes down to these trips, what you do with your physical preparation, what you do to look after your physical condition can absolutely make or break because you may get through 1 or 2 or 3 days relatively comfortable with this type of stuff. But if you've got to go for weeks after weeks and you're not looking after yourself, well, there's a lot of room for error. So we're going to be diving into some ideas. Now, to be clear, I'm not going to be talking about gear here. I'm not going to be diving into strategies because that's a whole rabbit hole we're here for hours and hours and hours. But what we're going to be talking about is some simple ideas around preparations, a few physical tips, and a few mental tips to help with this. Now, on the training and preparation side of things, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I've covered this a million times on our things before, but a few key points that we want to make sure we're covering. Number one is before you go, you want to be confident that you can do your longest distance on the trail, as a very least as a day hike. So in this particular situation, the question got through. I think looking at the trip itinerary, I think the longest day was 33 kilometers or something like that. So ultimately, before you go out, you want to be confident that you can at least do 33 kilometers with your heaviest pack weight that you expect for the trip. That typically ends up being the metric that we want to sort of say, hey, you're ready to go. Now, when we're looking at a longer term hiking plan, we want to sort of look at, okay, from now all the way up till just before you go, we want to slowly but surely and gradually build that up. And when I say gradually, I mean in the slowest possible way. Because one mistake a lot of people make with this is just to do too much walking too soon in their training and end up ramping up overuse injuries or this and that. We don't really want that. So building up gradually to your longest distance in the slowest possible way. And if anyone's watching this isn't sure about how to do that, please let me know, and I'll talk through some ideas to help with that. Now, number two is build up strength. Any long distance hiker or long distance walker will be crazy if they are not doing strength training. Building up strength in the calves, the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, the upper body as well, and the core as well, covering all your bases. It goes a long way. Again, if you're not sure how to get started with this, let me know. I have some resources I can share. And then on top of that, making sure you are building up some specific conditioning in your week with shorter sessions. And what I mean by that is looking at the specific things you're going to be faced on this adventure and expose the body to that in training. So this may involve pack walking if you're carrying a pack, which you probably are, or if you're pulling I know some people with the road walking things are pulling a cart or whatever it is, making sure you're training that, you're developing that, you're building up your tolerance to that with some pack walking sessions or some sled pulling sessions or whatever it may be. Making sure you're incorporating some stair and hill sessions in your training at some point, getting exposed to going up and down hills, and then also making sure over time you introduce a bit of pack weight to get your body used to that. On top of that, terrain matching. When you're doing these long distance walks, typically we're faced with a range of different terrain. You may be road walking, you may be on bitumen, you may be sand walking, you may be, on the other side of the world doing snow walking, or whatever it may be. And it may not always be possible, but trying to get some exposure to that. And I've had people in the past who trained and trained and trained and trained, and they've gotten to a really, really good point for their training, But then I've heard, look, I ended up having to do a whole day's worth of sand walking or beach walking. Hadn't done any of that in my training, and I just, my legs just did not like it. So terrain matching where you can. And then finally, with the training, when it comes down to this type of stuff, for these longer distance walks, we do end up doing quite a bit of walking and hiking. We do end up putting more stress through the body through pack walking or stair training or whatever it may be. So it can often be worthwhile leveraging what we call off-feet conditioning. So those types of cardio you do which don't put pressure through the feet, where you can incorporate more and more time, develop your aerobic fitness, develop your endurance or whatever it may be, in a way that isn't going to stress out your feet. So in this situation, it might be cycling, it might be the elliptical, it might be the rower, or whatever it may be. And when we're looking at physical preparations, there's a lot of simple stuff in there which can make a bit of a difference. So again, if anyone wants to learn a little bit more on any of those topics, let me know. I've got resources and build on that out, but we're not going to harp on about that too much more. Now let's come down and talk about physical on trail tips. So some specific things that you can be doing to help you when you're actually on these adventures. Um, Number one, nutrition. Nutrition plays a massive role in your energy, your recovery, your mood, and so many other things when we're on the trail. Realistically, most long distance hikers end up undereating, purely for the fact that pack weight ends up being a massive consideration. And a lot of long distance hikers try to shave as much as they can come down. And realistically, for nutrition, you can survive off anything. You can survive off barely eating anything. You can survive of just having dinner or just having breakfast or whatever it may be. And a lot of people do some really crazy things with their nutrition and still survive. But if you want to give yourself the best chance of not only having energy through the day and being in a good mood the day, but also give you the best chance of actually recovering day after day after day. So you can wake up in the morning feeling relatively fresh, feeling ready to go and survive over these multiple weeks and months sometimes. You want to be looking at nutrition. You want to give yourself the best chance possible. Without getting into too much detail, the most important thing, overarching principle to be aware of, is just knowing your numbers, meaning that you are aware of how many calories your body is going to need per day, how many calories your body is burning for how much walking you're doing per day, and how much your body will naturally burn, and matching your nutrition to make sure that you're not significantly under eating, but you are matching that and getting enough energy. Now, if you are unsure how to go about that, and if you're like, okay, cool, what do I do here? How do I figure this out? How do I know how much food I should be aiming for? Well, it's probably worthwhile, getting a bit extra help. You can go down the route of getting a dietitian consult, specifically getting a dietitian who specializes in hikers. This can be some of the best money you invest in your preparations because you can sit down with someone who has the dedicated knowledge to this, has experience with hikers, and come up with a plan. Or at the very least, finding a dietitian who specializes in hikers and just learning the basics through their content online. Now, someone that I work with quite closely is Kyle from Valley to Peak Nutrition, who is a dietitian who specializes in outdoor athletes. If you want to check him out, you can go to his Instagram at V2P Nutrition, and it comes up here, Valley to Peak Nutrition, Kyle Camp. He's got some really, really good information. I work quite closely with him. I think he's got a ton of free resources here where he does, sorry for the white screen. Yeah, he's got like YouTube videos, he's got podcasts, he's got a bunch of different stuff. And on top of that, I think he does a weekly Q&A on his Instagram as well. So he's a really good resource where you can check out V2P Nutrition. Now, beyond that, a couple of simple tips. When you're on your long distance hikes or any type of hikes, leverage your regular snacking. Oh, and let me actually share that link in the chat. So if anyone wants to check it out. Leverage your regular snacking. Again, one of the most simple things you can do to complement your energy through the day is making sure we're regularly snacking, regularly topping up our energy through the day. And when we're doing these long days, the day after day after day, this gets even more essential. So just setting yourself a target that you are going to have a small snack every hour or 90 minutes, or at the very least 2 hours, and just regularly get food in you. Even if you're not particularly massively hungry, you're getting something in you. It really does go a long way. And then making sure when you're looking at your meals, your breakfast, ideally a lunch if it's possible, and your dinner, that you're having well-rounded meals. That, yes, your snacking may be simple and you're just having what's convenient, what's easy, what's light, what doesn't sit in your stomach, but making sure your meals are a little bit more wholesome. So making sure there is a source of carbohydrates, a source of protein, a source of fat, making sure you do get some veggies, potentially some fruit or whatever it may be, and try to make sure at least you're looking after yourself with your full meals. Now, as very, very overarching principles of nutrition for a long distance hike, that goes a long way. Know your numbers so you know exactly what you need to be hitting to best sustain you, making sure you're having regularly snacking on the trail, and really use your meals to kind of build things out a little bit more, make it a little bit more wholesome. Next up is heat management. So this won't apply to all long distance hikes, but in this particular situation, we're going across Australia starting in October, getting pretty close to summer. It may potentially be very hot. And if we're doing long distance days and potentially being on bitumen or whatever it may be, or on the roads, there may not be a huge amount of shade. So we want to make sure we're looking after ourselves here. First and foremost, with any type of hot weather hike, electrolytes are your friend. Realistically, when we are exercising and when we're hiking, if we're in the heat, what tends to happen is we hike and hike and hike and hike. We sweat and we hike and hike and hike and hike and we drink water. And what tends to happen is if we are sweating and we're drinking water, we're replenishing the water with our water, which is great. But in our body and in our sweat, we also sweat out electrolytes. And what tends to happen is if we are sweating out electrolytes and just adding more and more water into the body, this can end up being a bit of an imbalance between how much water and how much electrolytes we have in the body. And it can lead to something that's called overhydration, which can be just as bad as dehydration. This is very, very, very a major risk factor when we're hot weather hiking. So making sure if you're looking at this, if you're going to be in summer days, electrolytes, making sure you are having some type of this. Yes, you will get some electrolytes from your foods and this and that, but it is definitely worthwhile supplementing this as well. Now, if you want to go really, really basic, you can go down to a local pharmacy, get a bunch of hydrolyte. That can work out pretty well. You can go to Woolies or whatever it may be, get some Gatorade powder or some Staminate powder. That can work as well. Or there are other brands out there which are kind of sort of more designed for endurance athletes, which are very high quality. They have extra carbohydrates, which can be used for fueling. If you're in Australia, Trail Brew is a great brand. They can be a good option. If you're worldwide, Tailwind can be a good option. Tailwind's a bit more expensive, but it is very, very high quality. But electrolytes are your friend, and making sure if you're doing hiking in the heat, you're having at least a serving each day. Number two, another useful thing that can be quite useful, especially if you're doing long distance days in the heat, are menthol mints. So the idea behind that is menthol has been shown if we have it during exercise, it can actually reduce our perception of heat, meaning we can actually sustain our exercise a little bit more. We can be a little bit more comfortable. It's not going to completely change the day, but can sometimes be enough just to help you get through those tough days. It's even more effective if you can pair it with cold water as well. So you have menthol, have some cold water. That's not always practical when hiking, but the mints by themselves can be useful. So if you're wondering what menthol mints are, you can get like Fisherman's Friend. They're in Australia in Woolies. I think they're worldwide or in a lot of countries at least. Fisherman's Friends, menthol mints, have them super light and just keep them for your hot days and have that. Really, really useful addition to your pack, and it can be quite useful. And then finally, if you are really worried about heat and you're like, hey, yeah, I'm going to go in the heat, and you know what, maybe where I live, it's a little bit cool. Or maybe I'm just like really susceptible to getting hit with the heat, whatever it may be. Potentially, you could look at some heat acclimatization before you head off. So the idea behind that is like altitude acclimatization, where we go to high altitude to get the body used to this type of thing. Before we go, we can do the same thing with heat. A few different ways you can go about this. If you live in Australia or live somewhere else, then you can get out and hike in the heat and just get a few hot weather hikes where you can get used to this before your big adventure. That can go a long way. Another option is basically that's not practical, not realistic, doing a little bit of sauna work before you head off. And I'm not saying go out and exercise in a sauna or do training sessions. Just sit in a sauna for 20 minutes a few times a week. If you have something accessible, that can often be enough just to help you feel a bit more comfortable with the heat and just have those first days a little bit better. Over time, if you're doing a long distance hike, you will naturally acclimatize to the heat if you get enough days like that. But giving yourself an advantage before you go can sometimes help. If you're going down that route, and if you have the option, ideally we want to match the types of heat. So if you can go down the sauna route, dry heat equals dry sauna is best. Wet heat equals wet sauna. So, for example, if you were going to go do a long distance hike and you're going somewhere that's going to be really humid or whatever it may be, and you have the option between different saunas you can find, doing one that's wet, that's humid, will probably be more effective. Alternatively, dry and dry. If you can't match it up or you don't have access to whatever it may be, doesn't matter too much, but that's ideal. So a few different options are around helping with the heat. And then next up is just on the last thing I want to, or second last thing I want to talk about on the physical side of things is a start and end of day routine. So typically when we're hiking, if it's a shorter hike, a day or two or three, whatever it may be, we can get away with a lot of stuff. When we're on the longer distance days, we typically want to be giving our body the best chance possible of starting the day fresh, starting the day comfortable, and also recovering and feeling good day after day. And having a little start and end of day routine can go a long way. Start a day routine is simply just doing 2 or 3 simple stretches that can just loosen up any joints that are tightened up overnight, help you feel a bit more comfortable to go, and it can be really useful. So I'll share this article here. It has a few different ideas around warming up before going. Typically with this type of stuff, I usually say find something that'll loosen up the ankles. So you can do something like a knee to wall stretch, where you're basically just pushing the knee forward and back, forward and back, forward and back, and loosen this up can be good. Alternatively, you can do rolling with like a water bottle or a trekking pole, which you may not be able to see super well here. Let me zoom in, and literally just rolling up and down on a water bottle can often be good. You can do something on the hips. You can do something on, through the hips or whatever it is. Just choosing a couple of exercises which loosen things up before you head off, and doing that every single day before you head off. That can be quite useful. I'm going to share that in the chat if you want to check this article out. On the flip side of things, looking at what you do at the end of a day can also be useful as well. Because the warm up, I would sort of say it can be nice to start your day, but it's not super essential. However, doing something at the end of the day where you can help the muscles recover, help the muscles calm down, just let everything chill out before the next day can be really useful. Now, ideas around here is you can basically just choose anything that just feels good at the end of the day, anything that's really targeting specific muscles, muscles that have been working. So you can stretch the hamstrings and doing something like just a simple hamstring stretch where you're just sitting on the floor and leaning forward. Very, very, very simple, but very, very effective. You could do something like a couch stretch where you're working like the quadriceps, where you're on a couch or a chair, and the video is awful. What's going on? I have no idea what's going on with that. Either way, or you can do a frog stretch or whatever it may be. But just coming up with some routine you do at the end of the day where you basically just stretch out or roll out muscles that are a little bit sore and help it all chill out. Doesn't have to be too technical, but it can go a long way. And just setting yourself a task at the start of every day and the end of every day, you do something. And then finally, resting. Resting before you need it is a really, really good tip in the sense that most hikers, when we're doing these long distance things, we get in the habit of just pushing and pushing and pushing, really ramping up the distance, really ramping up whatever it may be. And we really like pushing it. One of the most simple things you can do to look after your body, look after your physical, fatigue levels, is just set yourself the target that you just rest before you really feel like you need it. So instead of pushing to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I just need a break, I just need a rest, and then resting, preempt that a little bit. Have a little rest every 2 hours, have a little rest every 90 minutes, have a little rest or whatever it may be. Rest before you technically need it. Very, very simple, but can go a long way. And then finally, last thing I want to cover on this is mental on trail tips. So when we're doing these long distance hikes, obviously it can be a big mental battle when we're going through all of this. It can be very, very tough. So a few simple tips that can make a big difference. Number one is know some deeper reasons why you are doing what you're doing. And what I mean by that is if we are understanding some of the deeper reasons why we are actually doing one of these longer term hikes, which is different for everyone, it can be very useful psychologically to help us through. Now, in this particular situation, if someone's doing a fundraising hike, we may be pretty aware of what's going on. We may be doing this specific fundraiser for a particular reason. So deeper reasoning, we may all be aware of it, but it's definitely worthwhile digging in as well. A really, really great resource for this is a book that's called Appalachian Trials. You can get this off Amazon. Really, really, really cool. Basically, this book here, it's basically written by a guy who did the Appalachian Trail, long distance hike over in the States. And essentially, what it does is it talks through a bunch of really useful mental preparations and mental exercises to help with long distance hikings. This is one of the best reads you can do. It's only like what, $10 for a paper day thing. You can get $8 on Kindle. Very, very, very cheap, but a very good investment. It takes you through a lot of interesting stuff there. And I highly recommend it for anyone who's doing a longer distance walk. Next up, we want to consider boredom. Realistically, there will be situations on a long distance hike where you get a bit bored, where you're like, oh my gosh, I've been seeing the same terrain for ages. Or you know what, I've just got a really boring stretch. And just having some idea about how you can work your way around this, what you can lean on during this time can be really useful. So a couple of simple things, and this is common sense. A lot of people do this already, but it's worthwhile thinking about. Maybe just have a playlist where you're like, hey, this playlist has a lot of really, really, really of my favorite songs, and I'm going to use this in boring sections. Or maybe this is a lot of like really non-vocal songs. It's a bit monotonous and I can kind of go into like almost a trance listening to this playlist. Could be useful. Maybe having some audiobooks, downloaded and pull in on them when you need. A lot of people like tend to avoid headphones in when they're walking, but maybe worthwhile just having this use ready for you if you need it. Obviously, on a long distance hike, then we have to consider like electronics and we have to consider charging and all of that, but definitely worthwhile thinking about. Or just coming up with other things you can lean on to if you're bored. Another thing you want to consider about is a busy mind, in the sense that a lot of long distance hikers will often find they'll get to the end of a day hiking or a day walking, and they physically will be very, very tired. Legs will be sore, they'll be a bit flat, whatever it may be. They really want a big rest so they can wake up fresh the next day. But sometimes the mind just ends up being wired. Maybe you got a tough section the next day, you're a little bit worried about it. Maybe you've just been thinking about what's coming up and you just cannot shut your mind off at the end of the day. And it affects your sleep and it affects your recovery and it ends up being a bit tough. So definitely worthwhile before you even go into things, just consider what can you do to deal with a busy mind if that does happen. A couple of simple options: journaling. Doing a bit of journaling each night can really, really help. Just getting pen to paper and writing down what's in your head, what's going on, can often calm us down mentally. For me, with my hikes, I always bring a pen and paper. I like doing this. It's very, very, very useful for me. Or if you don't want to carry something, maybe something like box breathing, where you are sitting in a chair or lying in your bed and breathing in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and repeat that and count that in your head. And the idea behind this is not only are we breathing slowly and intentionally, which can calm us down and relax us a little bit, but when we're thinking about those numbers, when we're thinking about 4, 4, 4, it can kind of calm the mind down. It can get us really connected with this, can be really useful. There could be a bunch of other things you think about here, but going in with a strategy around what am I going to do if I have a busy mind is very useful. And the final thing you want to think about is what am I going to do if I get in a tricky spot on the track? What if I get to a section where I'm absolutely knackered? What if I get to a point where my feet are sore? What if I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? It's raining, it's horrible weather, and I'm just really struggling. What are you going to do? What are you going to lean on in that situation? There's a million and one things you can do here, but a couple of ideas: positive mantras, coming up with a simple positive statement that you can repeat to yourself again and again and again and again in a tricky spot can be very useful. Or coming up with like micro tasks and say, you know what, if I'm in a situation where it's raining, it sucks, maybe I'm just going to sort of give myself a game where I'm just going to focus on a distance, a landmark in the distance. I'm going to put all my attention into getting to that. And once I get to that, I acknowledge it. I, give myself a pat on the back, and then I focus on the next task or breaking things up in a certain way, whatever it may be. These things. There's a million and one different approaches you can do in each of these different sections, but it's definitely worthwhile considering these things before you head off. Having a strategy for boredom in your back pocket, so when you lean on it, you know what you're going to do. Having a strategy for a busy mind in your back pocket, so you know what you're going to do. Having a strategy for this, so you know what you're going to do. And pre-planning this stuff can really go a long way. So, a bit of information there, I know, but this is really ticking off a lot of things that I think a lot of people put a lot of attention into their gear, and they think and think and think gear. They think and think and think logistics, but they often overlook these things. I would sort of say make sure your training's right, make sure you have a good grasp on nutrition, have a consideration around the heat and the start and end of day routine, and really set yourself the promise of resting before you need it. And then put some thought into the mental side of things as well. If you can cover up all of these bits and pieces, it can fill a lot of gaps. It can help you in a lot of different situations, and it can be very, very useful for any long distance adventure. So, with that being said, I'm probably going to wrap things up here. I think that's enough on this particular topic. Hopefully, it gives a few ideas. Hopefully, it gives a few insights. If anyone does have any questions on anything I covered today, please do let me know. And on top of that, if anyone does have any questions that they want me to cover in one of these future Q&As, please click it over and I'm happy to chat to them as well. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap things up here. For anyone who is watching this in the future, I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you got a little out of it. And we'll talk to you